Let's start at the very beginning. A very good place to start. Okay, I guess I just dated myself. For those of you who did not catch this ancient cultural reference, these are the opening words of a song sung by Julie Andrews in the 1965 movie, The Sound of Music. In the movie, Julie Andrews played a nun who became the governess for the 7 children of the Von Trapp family. And in the song, she is teaching the children about music. And she starts from the very beginning, which is a very good place to start. Anyway, I'm not Julie Andrews, and this isn't The Sound of Music. So I'm not gonna sing Do Re Mi. But this is, after all, the beginning of the new year. And I know that the traditional Torah readings for Rosh Hashanah are supposed to be about Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Ishmael. But I mean, if we're going to begin the new year, shouldn't we begin at the beginning? You know, like, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was unformed and shapeless, with darkness over the surface of the deep, and a wind from God swept over the water, and God said, "Let there be light." Rosh Hashanah is, after all, supposed to commemorate God's creating our world, so there is at least that very good reason to begin thinking about the stories of creation in the book of Genesis this morning. And I'd like to suggest, in the next several minutes, that there's another maybe even better reason for talking about these stories of creation this morning. And yes, I did say stories. As probably most of you already know, there are 2 very different stories of creation in the opening chapters of the book of Genesis. The first story is about God creating an ordered and structured world, a world that separates light from darkness, sky above from water below, land that is separate from the waters below, and trees and vegetation that faithfully reproduce themselves. You don't get asparagus from watermelon plants or figs from petunias. And then God created the sun, the moon, and the stars that move through space in a structured sequence of time, reliably indicating day and night, months, seasons, and years. And finally, God created varieties of birds in the sky, fish in the waters, and animals that roam the land. And each type of animal in each of these 3 habitats, air, water, and land, also reproduces only its own species. It's a very ordered, structured, and you might even say scientific world. You know, it's not the way we would scientifically describe creation today, but it does describe a world that operates according to rules and principles that are reliable and predetermined. And human beings are the crowning glory of this world. We are created in God's image to rule over the animal kingdom and indeed over all that God created. Then comes the second story of creation. In the second story, the first human Adam is formed from the earth like a clay sculpture. And God breathed life into Adam and then created a Garden of Eden and put Adam there. And then God created animals to find a partner for Adam. But when none of the animals would make a suitable partner, God used divine anesthetics to put Adam to sleep and performed surgery to create a partner for Adam, Eve. And God told Adam and Eve that they could eat whatever fruit they would like in the garden, except for the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Now, at this point, you might ask yourself, what on earth was God thinking? Can you imagine a parent baking chocolate chip cookies and then putting them in a cookie jar on the kitchen counter and then instructing her 5 or 4-year-old child not to eat those delicious smelling cookies in the jar? You can eat any of the fruits and vegetables in the refrigerator that you want, but don't you dare touch those luscious cookies in the cookie jar. I mean, really, what on earth was God thinking? So, of course, Adam and Eve ate the chocolate chip cookies. I mean the fruit of the tree of knowledge. But who could resist the temptation? So what are we to make of these two stories of creation? Well, let me tell you what I make out of these two stories, and then I can explain the other good reason for starting at the beginning of the Torah with these stories of creation on Rosh Hashanah. The first story tells us that the world God created is not chaotic and random, just the opposite. It is structured and predictable. Genesis doesn't mention gravity, but Isaac Newton hadn't discovered that yet. On the other hand, I'm quite sure that our ancestors knew that if they drove a car on an icy mountain road that skidded over the side of the mountain, it would certainly be the last thing that they would remember, if they had cars back then. But you know what I mean. So God created this ordered, structured, scientific world, and that's great, because that means that we can figure out the rules that make everything work so predictably. But what these nifty, predictable rules cannot do is to make the world that God created kind and compassionate, or fair and just. Gravity just doesn't care who's in the car going over the side of the mountain. It could be Joseph Stalin, or it could be Mahatma Gandhi. It's not a matter of justice or compassion. Gravity just is. So God has created this ordered world, but God is full of compassion and kindness. God is all about justice and fairness. Even though the world operates according to scientific rules, God wanted a world that would reflect his own justice and kindness. But if God interfered with those rules in order to make things fair and kind, well, then they wouldn't be rules anymore, would they? But suppose God could create a creature that could be taught what kindness and empathy are, what justice and fairness are, a creature that would be more intelligent than all the other creatures and would have opposable thumbs to manipulate things better in the world. You know, a creature who could think independently, with free will, to make choices about what to do with all these intelligence and abilities. This creature could choose to create new inventions that would protect the beautiful plants and animals. This creature could create social structures that would provide support and comfort for everyone who's in need. It could create rules for a society that would ensure fairness and equity among people. And the best part of all that is, none of the laws of nature would be violated in doing any of those things, because the creature is itself part of the natural world. But where to find such a creature? And how would God know if God was successful in creating such a creature? So God decided to run a scientific experiment. Work with me here. That's the second story of creation. Adam and Eve were given only one rule: do not eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge, or you will die. Any other creature that is naturally programmed to instinctively know that something is going to kill them, they're not going to eat it. But what would this human creature do? God had basically told Adam that the fruit was poison. Would Adam choose to eat it anyway? God waited. And sure enough, Adam and Eve ate the fruit. God's experiment had worked. God had invented a creature that had free will. Humans could choose what they wanted to do and when they wanted to do it. Now all God had to do, I say that a little bit facetiously, all God had to do was train these human beings to be good. And that is the whole rest of the Bible in a nutshell. God trying over and over and over again to teach us humans how to be good. First as individuals with Adam and Eve, with Noah, with Abraham, and with others, and then with Moses and the Israelite people to create a society based on being good. The whole rest of the Bible does not make any sense unless we first assume that each one of us has free will. Each of us can choose a life to be good, to live a life that's good, a life of kindness and thoughtfulness, honesty and fairness, or we can choose not to do so. Or in the words of the Torah, I call heaven and earth to witness against you this day. I have put before you life and death, blessing and curse. Choose life, that you and your offspring will live. How? By loving God and heeding God's commands and holding fast to him. Alas, God just didn't realize how often and how badly we humans would, misbehave. Almost right away, Cain chose to kill his brother Abel. Oh my God. Later, a whole generation is so corrupt and evil, God decided he had to destroy the whole lot of them and start all over again with one righteous family, Noah and his wife and children, and so on in the rest of the Bible. Then God tried to train Abraham to be a model of virtue, and sometimes he was. But the family was certainly flawed, as the Bible tells us in so many ways. When God rescued the Israelites from slavery in Egypt, God gave them laws to follow to create a compassionate and righteous society. But despite the best efforts of Moses and the prophets who followed after him, it was not a direct and easy path to utopia. In fact, the Bible seems to relish recording all the details of every bad decision ever made and all the catastrophes that followed. Nevertheless, it seems to me that the Bible's essential message is God wants us to keep trying to make it better. We're supposed to learn from these historic mistakes and not repeat them. And now we can understand the other reason that these stories of creation are so relevant to what we're doing right here, right now this morning on Rosh Hashanah, and what we're going to keep doing through Yom Kippur. According to the Torah, human beings have been charged by God with taking care of the planet, taking care of all the plants and animals, the rivers and the lakes and the oceans, the mountains, the valleys and the plains. God created us to be superheroes on this planet, just like Marvel and DC comic book superheroes. You know, superheroes have superpowers, and our superpowers are our amazing brains, our physically adept bodies, and most especially, our ability to choose what we want to do with them. And we humans have conquered the planet with our superpowers. As humans, we are the uncontested rulers of our world. But our purpose here, according to the Bible, is to use our superpowers to look after those in need, those who are in pain, those who seek justice and fairness, and those who just need a little love and understanding. But we just don't always do the right thing. We hurt each other, sometimes, especially those we love. We're not always honest with others, or even sometimes with ourselves. We're not always kind and considerate, especially when we're on the phone or texting and social media. We're not always patient and mindful, particularly when we're driving in heavy traffic. In short, we take our free will for granted and we abuse it. Or in religious language, we sin. And that's why we have these days of awe, to reevaluate our behavior, to remind ourselves of our responsibilities, to remember that we're created in God's image in order to do the things that God wants us to do here. Rosh Hashanah represents the anniversary of the creation of humankind, Adam and Eve. And that is why it is the perfect time to take stock of our moral status on an annual basis. So in the United States, we pay annual income taxes. In order to do that, we first have to assess what our income was for the year and then make all the adjustments for various deductions. And the tax year ends on December 31st, and then we have 3.5 months to settle our accounts and to pay the tax on April 15th. Rosh Hashanah begins a new spiritual, moral accounting year. It gives us the opportunity to look back over the last year and see when and what we have done right, or when we've said the right things, and generally how we have tried to improve our character. And we also try to be honest with ourselves about where we have fallen short of what we had hoped to do and achieve. And where we have fallen short, we still have some time to make amends. But instead of 3.5 months to pay the tax, we have 10 days to settle our moral accounts. We have until Yom Kippur. Of course, we also try to resolve and be better throughout the coming year, and that way, at Rosh Hashanah next year, we'll have less tax to pay in our spiritual taxes. And so today, we begin again at the beginning, which is a very good place to start. And although it's not as easy as ABC or 1, 2, 3 or Do, Re, Mi, we can use these days to be inspired by our prayers, our tradition, and even by our Creator, to be good, to be kind, to be compassionate, to be fair, honest, and just. And when we choose, with our free will, to do so, we are literally God's hands and feet in bringing God's goodness into the world. So what are we waiting for? Let's begin. Shana Tova.